Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome back to Tactics Board. The championship games keep on coming for Norwich City, who are in action again tomorrow night when they take on promotion-chasing Burnley at Turf Moor. Not an easy one by any means, but after a fairly promising performance against Sunderland on Tuesday night, they'll feel confident that they can come away from Lancashire with a decent result. You know the drill here on Tactics Board. First of all, I'm going to show you the team that I think Johannes Hoftorp will choose for the game. Then we're going to take a little bit of a closer look at Burnley, how they'll set up, and then we're going to come on to Jacob Wright, who I think is the name on a lot of people's lips at the moment. A big source of optimism when it seems to be quite a tense atmosphere among the fan base at the moment. And of course, that's understandable given some of the results in recent weeks. But it feels like Wright's performances have been a real positive. And I'm going to take a little bit of a closer look at how he's made that happen, what he offers tactically, and what he could be for Norwich City going forward. But we're going to begin with that starting 11. So without further ado, here it is. So I've gone for Angus Gunn in goal, Kellen Fisher at right back, Shane Duffy and Jose Cordoba in the centre of defence, with Kenny McLean at left back, Jacob Wright, Marcelino Nunez and Anis Ben Slimane in the midfield, with Emiliano Marcondes on the right, Borja Sainz on the left and Josh Sargent through the middle. Up front, now you notice I've only gone for the one change from Tuesday night's draw with Sunderland, and although it feels like with the tight turnaround, it might be an opportunity for Torp to mix things up a little bit and maybe introduce a bit of freshness. I think after the quality of that performance against the sort of opposition that Sunderland were, I think Torp will be encouraged by what his players did and maybe stick with the large majority of them for this one. I've still got Kenny McLean at left back. Of course, that was a small surprise going into the Sunderland game. Obviously, someone we've seen mostly in midfield, even at centre-back, but not much at left-back. But I thought he did really, really well. Where I thought he contributed to Norwich tactically was the fact that with that left footer out at left-back, even though Ben Krasene, Lucian Mahovo and Callum Doyle are all injured, it gave them a little bit of natural width from the fullbacks. Although McLean did tuck in a lot of the time and play that inverted role, there was also that balance and that width where they could go wide if they wanted to, and that allowed the wingers to tuck in a little bit more. We saw, especially in the second half when Marcondes was introduced, he got into sort of number 10 positions. In the first half, it was Sainz in number 10 and even number 9 positions inside. And I think the fact that they had those more natural, wider fullbacks in Fisher on the right-hand side, obviously a right footer, and Kenny McLean on the left-hand side, a left footer, that meant that they could provide the width and those wingers could tuck in a little bit. I think that was also something that Norwich did a bit more than they usually would. Usually in terms of the press, they do go quite narrow and the winger will press the other centre-back. So if the ball's on the Norwich right-hand side, Sargent will press the left-hand centre-back, and then Sienats normally will press the right-hand side centre-back, and then if it goes to the full-back, one of the midfielders jumps out wide. So there is a little bit of that differing structure in terms of out of possession. That's something they've done for most of the season, but I thought we saw that more in possession as well. Anis Ben Slimane, particularly on the left-hand side, played very wide, and Borja Sainz got into those more central areas and caused damage for Norwich against Sunderland. Of course, they should have produced in the final third. They should have scored a goal, and I think, as Torp said, they created more than enough chances to get that decisive goal in the game. So that's where, especially against an opposition that has conceded so few goals this season, Burnley have only conceded 12 in the league this term, they do really need to take those chances, and that's probably where the difference will come if Norwich are to improve. I have gone for that one change with Marcondes instead of Oscar Schwartau. Of course, the pre-match press conference was actually added on to the reaction to the Sunderland game because of the tight turnaround, so we don't quite know whether he'll be ready. He came off at half-time with a dead leg, wasn't really able to run much in the last 10-15 minutes of the first half, and I also thought that Marcondes just was very impactful when he came on. Maybe not his best few weeks in the Norwich shirt over the last few weeks, but combined really well with Josh Sargent, got into those number 10 positions that he likes a lot, and I think it would make sense for a couple of reasons for him to come in for Schwartau. So I've gone for that. But either way, I think Torp has a good base to work with after quite a good performance against Sunderland. Now, I think it would be easy to assume, given that Burnley defensive record, that they don't want much possession, that they sit deep and soak up pressure, and they certainly are capable of doing that. But if you look at their stats over the course of the season, they've actually had 56% or even more than 56% of possession in their games overall. So they are a team who likes to keep the ball, who likes to, in a way, have the initiative, but they also use that as a bit of a defensive tactic to take the sting out of games, to make the time pass. And if they do go 1-0 up, then you're in a bit of trouble, because they're very good at doing that, at keeping the ball, at winning it back quickly. And that's where the problem will come for Norwich. So they'll need a fast start to avoid conceding the first goal. And they'll also need to be quite effective in their pressing, because if you don't win it back quickly after you've lost it, then Burnley get into their pattern, and they're really good at sustaining that when the team gets back into their defensive shape. Burnley are just happy to pass it around in safe areas. They know where those safe areas are, and they're very good at doing that. So Norwich will need to win the ball back in the first 3 to 5 seconds after losing it. Otherwise, it will be very difficult for them to avoid sustained periods of possession for Burnley. And of course, when it's still 0-0, that might be a good thing for Norwich. But I think after that Sunderland performance and result, he'll want to build on it with a more positive performance. And yes, you're going away to one of the best teams in the league, so that might not quite be possible. But I think if Norwich can do it, then they'll try to, and they'll want to be on the ball as often as possible. So as I said, that counter-pressing, that desperation to win the ball back when you've just lost it, will be really, really important. I think they also will have to go through the lines as much as possible. It will have to be short passes doing that, because James Trafford is such a good goalkeeper at coming and sweeping up, and probably, well, for me, he's the best keeper in the league by far at that. So unless you get those long passes absolutely perfect, it's really, really difficult to get in behind Burnley from a distance. You have to get players into number 10 positions, picking the ball up in and around the edge of the area, and then sliding strikers in that sense. So that's where somebody like Marcondes, his skills might come in handy. Slimane as well, if they can get Sainz into those number 10 positions and maybe shooting in and around the edge of the area. That's a much more likely tactic to score against a Burnley team with such an effective goalkeeper sweeping in behind them, than trying to go long and get the ball in between the centre-backs and Trafford, because Trafford starts so high up, and then he's got the pace and the nous and the timing to come and claim those balls if you don't get them absolutely spot on. So a few things for Norwich to be wary of. To be honest, there aren't many weaknesses for them to exploit, but if they can keep things tight defensively, then they've always got a chance. But as I said previously, they will have to take those chances much better than they did against Sunderland. Now, to finish with, I wanted to discuss Jacob Wright, because, as I said earlier, he's the man who a lot of Norwich fans are getting really excited about. He wants to stay at the club beyond the summer, as he told us after the Plymouth defeat. Johannes Torp has said he'd like to sign him, so it feels very likely that this isn't just a loan until the end of the season, but a midfielder who is really part of the long-term plans at Norwich City. And I think that is great news for Norwich fans after that performance against Sunderland. So I just wanted to examine what it is that makes him so good at the moment. I think, first of all, you have to acknowledge the improvement, because early on, I remember 25 minutes against Hull where he really couldn't find a pass, wasn't doing much in terms of the defensive side of the game, and looked like he was really struggling. I think we've seen him slowly progress from game to game. Well, I say slowly, he's progressed from game to game, and suddenly in 2 or 3 months, he looks almost like a completely different player to the one who arrived at Carrow Road. So I think a bit of time to get used to the Championship, where of course he'd never played before, has really helped him. And to be fair to Torp and his coaching staff, you have to give them credit as well, because he wasn't looking great in his first few weeks as a Norwich player and has come on leaps and bounds since then. So I think he's improved a lot, and what he's got a lot better at is getting on the ball and relieving the pressure on Norwich, because that's a really important part of what they want to do. Obviously, when you look at the best teams in terms of what they do defensively, the difference between Championship level and, Sunday League level is that in terms of every pitch, of course, the amount of space is exactly the same. It's not just huge players filling up more spaces on the pitch. It's teams who know where to press and know which areas to cover off to stop teams playing through them. And so often when you've got a team like Norwich, they're stifled by the inability to play the ball into midfield. Of course, teams know that it's easy for a goalkeeper to roll it out to a centre-back because the centre-backs can come into the box for a goal kick and the opposition can't. So that first line, when it's a goal kick and it's not a counter-pressing situation, it's Norwich in comfortable possession deep in their own half, it's very tricky to go and press the ball straight from the centre-back straight away. So what they do as a defensive tactic is stop the ball going into midfield. They condense that space and they basically leave a situation where you've got Shane Duffy passing to Jose Cordoba and he returns it to Duffy, and then he passes to a full-back and it returns back to him, and you've got that U-shape going on without being able to penetrate the lines of defence. And what Jacob Wright does is he effectively helps you get through those, and it's not always through amazing turns and quick passes into Josh Sargent or amazing progressive passes. Just by being able to take the ball in those condensed midfield areas, have a bit of pressure on him and not lose it, and keep the ball and move it to a different area of the pitch. He might not be playing fantastic passes over the top or through for Josh Sargent or into Borja Sainz, but by taking the ball into that area, allowing the press to come in and around him and then open up space elsewhere and move it there, he gives the next player a bigger chance of finding a better position with his pass, of finding a player in a more advanced area of the pitch. And that ability in midfielders in a possession-based system is so important. There are so many midfielders who will run into a space where there's not much pressure, take a pass, return it to the centre-back. But Wright stays in that position where he might have a couple of defenders on his back, but he isn't going to lose it. He moves it out of the area, and then those two defenders are taken out of it, and those are the perfect midfielders for this Torup system. So I think we've seen a lot of that, and on the other side of it, defensively, I think he's improved a lot, winning a lot more duels, getting into the right positions to screen the back four, and higher up as well. He knows when to push, when to go. His timing is very good. So Norwich can press and rely on him to win the ball fairly high up the pitch for a defensive midfielder, but it's not got the risk of him just rushing in, people being able to play around him easily and opening up space behind him. I think he's got a lot better at that as well. So two sides of his game now that Norwich are really benefiting from, and I think he looks like somebody who could play a big role for them in the future. But right now, the focus, of course, is on Burnley tomorrow and how that game plays out. Of course, we'll have every kick covered across our channels. So go to pinkun.com/subscribe if you haven't already, and you'll have access to all of that. Thank you very much for joining me on Tactics Board. I'll, of course, be back pre-Portsmouth on Good Friday, when hopefully the feeling is, I want to say, as positive as it was against Sunderland, maybe even more positive if Norwich can get a result against promotion-chasing Burnley. Let's see, and as I said, pinkun.com/subscribe, the place to go. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you very soon.